LV De La Rosa, and this is my short story, Changing Thursdays. I hope you enjoy, and I hope it helps you fall asleep. Thursday night, freshly showered, popcorn in the microwave. Bunny Astor carefully set out her hairbrush and 2 cups of hot cocoa on the coffee table. She managed to find a documentary her brother hadn't already seen, and it was set to play. The only thing missing was the brother in question. He came down the stairs just as the popcorn was finished, a pained expression on Sammy's face. Bunny narrowed her eyes at him, already tensing. "What?" "Bunny," he started, in a slow, gentle way he always did when he was anticipating a meltdown. "I think we should talk about changing things up." Bunny's lips pursed. Sammy winced. "You know I love you more than anything," he went on. Bunny slammed the microwave door shut without breaking eye contact. Sammy swallowed nervously. "But 14 is a little old to be getting your hair brushed, don't you think?" "No," answered Bunny flatly. "Bunny," Sammy pleaded. Bunny took the popcorn, shut off the TV, and snatched up her hairbrush. "We can still watch the documentary," he tried. Bunny ignored him, heading back upstairs without a second look. "Or we can find a new thing," he called after her. But she retreated into her bedroom, kicking the door shut behind her. Dumping everything on her dresser, she locked the door just in time for Sammy to try and follow her. "Bunny, open the door. Let's talk about this." Bunny shut off the lights and stood in the dark, waiting for him to leave. "How about we go to the museum on Thursdays? Or go to Misty's for dinner? You like Misty's," he continued. Bunny didn't give a single response. Sammy sighed, resigning himself to his temporary fall from grace. "Everything is going to be okay. This isn't as big as you're making it. Still nothing. I love you. Please don't burn the house down," he said, before reluctantly walking away. Burning the house down sounded like a perfectly good idea. Bunny waited for his footsteps to fade, then dragged all her blankets and pillows under the bed. She collected the popcorn and a few stuffed animals and took them under as well. There, perfectly safe and enclosed, Bunny fumed. It wasn't just getting her hair brushed. It was sharing a bed with her sisters, being pushed around in a shopping cart, getting chucked into the lake like a beach ball. Childhood was ending. It had been ending for a long while now, and their most recent move into this stupid town seemed to have accelerated it. She hated this too big house, and she hated this too big room. She hated her new school, and she hated being asked about her goals. She had no clue what her career aspirations were, and considered it unforgivably rude that anyone thought she should. She also most definitely didn't want to fall in love or get married or have kids. She didn't want her own family. She wanted to stay with the one she already had. The terror of it all had been haunting her from the very first accusation of a crush. Worst of all, none of her siblings seemed to share the sentiment. The least they could do was be sad too. But Gracie was planning her future wedding every other day. Mercy, a thrilling career as an entertainment agent. Sammy wanted to get a PhD in everything, and Faith just wanted to not have to take care of them anymore. Only Ruth would go on being Ruth. Bunny fell asleep, simmering with indignation that she couldn't simply command her siblings to stop aging. She couldn't even go back in time and stop them from moving to this horrible place. Her dreams were riddled with terrifying imagery, and she woke the next day with even more pent-up rage. Sammy made an extravagant breakfast spread with all of Bunny's favorite things, but Bunny continued giving him the silent treatment, and her 4 older sisters exchanged knowing looks. They had most definitely been eavesdropping the night before. Bunny headed to school early without breakfast just to escape them. The path passed through a park, and it was there that Bunny noticed Kip Everscorn stretched out in the grass. They had met for the first time only a few days ago, but Kip was hard to forget, and even harder not to notice. Bunny found herself walking up to her before consciously deciding to. Today, Kip wore sunglasses, a slew of mostly silver jewelry, a knitted sweater depicting a goose eating a dog, jeans with too many zippers to make sense, and slippers? Bunny lightly kicked one of Kip's wool clogs. "Your grandpa actually lets you go to school like this?" she questioned. Kip grinned. "Grandpa, in his infinite elder wisdom, knows better than to question my impeccable taste." When they first moved, Sammy announced they'd be wearing uniforms to school, and Mercy almost broke the TV throwing her school books at him. He reasoned if they didn't draw too much attention, they might not get into any fights like the last school. "Why are you here? Norman said you lived on the other side of school," Bunny moved on. "So you asked about me." Kip's smile widened. Bunny rolled her eyes. "Why are you all by yourself? I hear none of you Asters are ever alone," Kip quipped back. Bunny felt small butterflies at the revelation that Kip had been asking about her too. She did her best to ignore the feeling, and the question. Her stomach growled, offering just which direction to hide it. "Do you want to get breakfast at Misty's?" she asked. Kip hopped up and threw a loose arm around Bunny's shoulders. "Now, who told you Misty's is my favorite breakfast spot?" she teased. Off they went. Along the way, with Kip so close, Bunny became conscious of a very faint smell. Mint, wood, and something unlike anything else. Something caught between natural and artificial. That particular mix of scents was well known to Bunny. It was the smell of magic. Most humans wouldn't notice it without being properly taught to. The ones who did might mistake it for perfume or scented oil. But Bunny knew all too well that it was the smell of someone who either just performed witchcraft or was using magic to disguise themselves. As soon as they stepped inside the diner, a waitress approached Kip with a wide smile. "Kip, what are you doing on this side of town? How are you?" she asked. Kip hugged her enthusiastically. "Oh my God, hi Jenna, you look fantastic." "Oh, stop," Jenna blushed. "I've gained at least 5 pounds. "Which explains that hot ass," said Kip, looking at her from over her sunglasses. "Don't you talk to me like that, young lady," laughed Jenna. "I'm an honest woman, Jenna. I gotta speak my truth," Kip winked. Jenna laughed again. "Does your grandpa know how incorrigible you've become? How is he, by the way?" "I'm this close to taking his phone away," said Kip, shaking her head. "Old people these days. You teach them the ways of online shopping, and suddenly they'll make any excuse to never go outside." By now, Jenna was laughing so much the other patrons were staring. Bunny's stomach growled. Kip didn't seem to notice either. "So how are the kids?" "Growing up too fast," Jenna sighed. She went on to give a full report on how both sons were behaving and how poor their grades were, how the house was always a mess and the husband never did the yard work, how her mother-in-law was insufferable, how the car was making funny noises, and so on and so forth until eventually someone had to rush her back to work. As they scooted into a booth, Bunny shrugged off her backpack and oversized denim jacket. Kip sat across from her with an arm bent back on the seat. "Who was that lady?" Bunny asked. Kip shrugged. "I have no idea." Bunny stared at her dumbfounded. "You called her by name." "She was wearing a name tag." "But then how'd you know she had kids?" I didn't. I guessed. Then why did we have to stand there talking to that lady for so damn long? Bunny snapped, hungry enough to be mad at anything. 'Cause what if she gives us a freebie? Answered Kip. And just as she said it, Jenna arrived with 2 free slices of pie. Bunny scarfed down while Kip played politician again. After finishing her pie, Bunny dug through her backpack for the math homework she never finished. As she smoothed it out on the table, she noticed Kip hadn't eaten most of her pie. Bunny could also tell and feel Kip's eyes were on her. But with Kip's sunglasses, which she had kept on, there was no way to know for sure. If it wasn't for the smell before, she might have shrugged both things off. But where humans were constantly looking for something new to draw their attention, fairies tended to keep their focus on a single thing. They could also get terribly sick from eating too much human food. Norman did say Kip's father was a fairy, but the general consensus was that his genes had skipped over Kip entirely. That belief was only strengthened by the fact that their school didn't even allow fairies to attend. The pie, the sunglasses, the faint smell of magic. Bunny felt the weight of discovering a secret she wasn't supposed to know. Kip wasn't as human as she presented. They had already ordered, but Bunny considered making an excuse to leave. She didn't want Kip to get sick from eating an omelet. Or maybe if she confronted Kip about being a fairy, she could drop the facade. But she didn't know Kip well enough to guess how she'd react to either of those options. Either way, it wasn't really Bunny's problem. Still, she ruminated on it while staring down her math homework. She wasn't making any progress, and Kip noticed. "Something wrong?" she asked. "No," said Bunny quickly. "You look very worried," she chuckled. To stop herself from blurting out the truth, Bunny instead asked, "Where's your backpack?" Kip shrugged. "Probably somewhere." Bunny eyed her suspiciously. She was already beginning to get a sense of Kip's character. Kip grinned at her expression. "Are you worried I lost it?" she asked innocently. "That's so sweet of your ditching school," Bunny cut her off. "Me?" questioned Kip, dramatically putting a hand to her chest. Bunny chewed on the inside of her cheeks to keep from smiling. "Didn't your grandpa notice you leaving without it?" "Well, I walk really fast. His eyesight ain't so good," Kip trailed off. Bunny shook her head and tried to give a disapproving look. That poor old man. Kip probably gives him heart palpitations, she thought. The omelets arrived. Bunny tried to eat and work at the same time, avoiding looking up so that Kip didn't feel pressured to eat. Meanwhile, Kip stared at her with quiet amusement. "So, where are you from?" asked Kip pleasantly. "Nowhere," Bunny answered with a mouthful of omelet. "Does nowhere have a name?" "No." "Do you like the new house?" "No." "Any particular reason?" "No." "How come your sisters weren't with you this morning?" "How come you don't mind your business?" Bunny snapped. "How come you don't seem to believe in the power of friendship?" Kip said, mimicking her exact tone. Kip took the opportunity to pluck up her homework. "Let's see how we're doing." "I'm just trying to get it done. I don't like math," Bunny said, a little self-consciously. As Kip looked over her answers, the corners of her mouth twitched. "Don't laugh," Bunny snapped. "They don't all have to be right." When Kip still didn't answer, Bunny added, "It's not like I did everything wrong." No, said Kip quickly. "You just forgot to carry the negative for a few of these. And also a bunch of other stuff." "Ugh," Bunny groaned, slumping sideways into her seat. "We can fix this," Kip assured her. "We just need to go over a few minor things. And maybe perform an exorcism." Bunny threw her spoon at her. They spent the next hour going over the math sheet. Kip was, annoyingly, a good teacher. After a few problems together, Bunny was able to breeze through the rest on her own. She was so elated she'd forgotten entirely about the time, and was horrified to realize they only had 15 minutes before first period. "Don't freak out," Kip lightly tapped her nose. "I'll drive you." Bunny swatted her hand away. "You do not drive." "Yes, I do," said Kip, grinning. "Grandpa hates driving, so I convinced him to let me do it." "Pfft, and he just lets you take the car too?" asked Bunny incredulously. "Didn't you hear what I told Jenna? The only thing Grandpa needs is his phone and a giant cup of coffee," Kip said, getting up and leaving $50 on the table. "I can pay for myself," Bunny started, but Kip was already sauntering off. Being with Kip was starting to feel an awful lot like getting sucked into the ocean and spun around in the waves. Bunny expected the car to be a mess, or ancient, or already dented everywhere. Anything that would explain why her grandfather would just let Kip take it. But it was perfectly clean, inside and out, and looked like a relatively new model. She had also expected Kip's driving to be questionable at best and running every single red light and stop sign at worst. But Kip was also a perfect driver. In fact, she was safer and more confident behind the wheel than Bunny's 3 eldest siblings. Sammy and Ruth were slow and startled by everything. Faith exclusively drove fast and took as many liberties as she could get away with before Ruth had to vomit. "Did you steal the car?" Bunny asked. Kip chuckled. "Nope." "So your grandpa really does let you do whatever?" Bunny pressed. "Yeah, pretty much." Bunny sat back in her seat, dumbfounded. Anytime she wanted to go anywhere, she had to present a whole case as to why. If whoever she was talking to couldn't decide or got interrupted, they'd call in backup, and she'd have to give the whole explanation again. She was hardly ever allowed to go alone, and even if she was allowed, at least one of her siblings would invite themselves anyway. Everywhere they went was a group debate, and almost always ended with wherever Faith ultimately decided. If Faith wasn't there, then power was relegated to whoever was the oldest, and that certainly was never Bunny. And even on the off chance that Bunny's choice did get picked, the odds of them doing what she wanted once they arrived was practically zero. As they approached the school, Bunny looked at Kip with great envy. What must it be like to do whatever you want and not have to consult a single soul? Kip stopped the car just as she blurted out, "Teach me how to drive." Kip didn't need any persuading beyond that. She stepped on the gas pedal, grinning from ear to ear, and they drove off. 3-point deduction. Where's your turn signal? Kip scolded. Stop deducting points. Nothing even happens if I forget my turn signal, Bunny huffed. Kip gripped her shoulder. If you turn without the turn signal, the car will explode. And so will the car behind us and in front of us, Kip told her gravely. That's not a thing, Bunny laughed, rolling her eyes. Are you the driving expert or am I? Another 3-point deduction for not keeping your eyes on the road, Kip argued. Keep in mind, you only have to miss 14 points to fail the driving test, and you're already at 10, Missy. Because you keep deducting points for stupid things, Bunny snapped. After teaching her what all the buttons, knobs, and pedals did, and adjusting everything for Bunny to use, they'd spent the last 2 hours driving around an empty parking lot. Oh gee, I'm sorry for trying to, I don't know, keep you alive behind the wheel, set you up for success, teach you a little responsibility, Kip obnoxiously pointed out. "When are we actually getting on the road?" Bunny groaned. "As soon as you decide to not be terrible at this," Kip answered. Being not terrible took a whole other hour. Then, after taking a break, Kip drove them to a second location where the roads were mostly empty. After switching spots and readjusting everything, Bunny drove around for another hour before complaining she was bored and wanted more of a challenge. So finally, Kip let her pick somewhere to drive to. Bunny chose the beach. To start, she was nervous and on edge. Despite her previous bravado, her heart now pounded in her chest. However, Kip made her take a back road instead of the freeway, so she didn't have to go too fast or deal with too many other cars. Aside from a few tricky traffic lights, which Kip guided her through, Bunny made the journey without a single hitch. Once again, annoyingly, Kip was a good teacher. As they got closer, the town faded. The road's edge became surrounded by evergreens and moss-covered rocks, poppies and violets. They both rolled down their windows, the smell of spring blowing past. The sky was a perfect mix of sunshine and clouds. There were fewer cars, turns, and stoplights, so Kip allowed for some music to quietly play. Bunny's nerves settled just as Kip began to sing along with the radio, while tapping her hand on the window's edge. Briefly, Bunny was reminded of Ruth's own soft voice, singing her and her siblings to sleep. Kip lightly nudged Bunny's shoulder. "Don't pretend like you don't know this song." "You're the one who said I have to stay focused on the road," Bunny smiled. "This is part of the advanced course. You can't be a good driver unless you master singing and driving at the same time," Kip grinned. So they sang together. As Bunny's voice synchronized with Kip's, she felt a small, warm glow in her chest that steadily grew as all her worries fell away. The move, the house, the school, her slipping childhood and empty future, Bunny forgot it all. She held on to nothing and searched for nothing. She had hardly noticed how heavy it all was until she put it down. When they arrived at the beach, there was no formal parking lot, which made things much easier for Bunny. They jumped out of the car, energized by their singing and the glory of their success. Bunny giddily raced down the trail with Kip on her heels. They played chicken with the waves and raced each other on the sand. They climbed large boulders and discussed whether they'd survive a life at sea. Bunny boasted she could survive anything. Kip said she'd throw herself off the ship after a single hour without Wi-Fi. In brainstorming photo ideas, they decided to take turns lifting each other. Kip's phone rang while she was hanging over Bunny's shoulders, and the ringing startled Bunny into stumbling over her own feet. They both came crashing down in the sand. Kip was still laughing when she answered. "Hey, Sai." "Yeah, I'm still coming over. Sorry." "Yeah, sorry. I kinda got distracted. I'll be there soon." "Don't say like you don't believe me. I am." "Okay, bye." Bunny frowned, realizing their fun was over. Kip had to leave, and it felt as if they'd hardly spent any time together at all. "Who's Sai?" asked Bunny, while Kip drove them back. "Short for Cyrus. He's a fairy doctor. I do deliveries for him, and I kind of forgot my shift today." Kip smiled sheepishly. Once again, Bunny was taken aback. "You were ditching school to work?" "Yeah," Kip sighed. "I don't do it that often, but sometimes I need the extra cash." "For what?" Bunny snorted. more weird clothes? Well, obviously. Do you think I just thrifted these sick pants? Kip grinned. Bunny shook her head, suppressing a smile. Kip hesitated before continuing. Bunny saw her swallow, and she sat up, realizing that some of Kip's devil-may-care attitude was about to come down. It's kind of complicated, she started. The rest came tumbling out in a rush. But basically, my great-aunt made my grandpa a child star. She got rich off of him, then married him off when he was still a teenager. But afterwards, she took his firstborn son, like fucking Satan, and tried to do the same thing with him, except he died because of it. Then she died, and not even a year later, my grandma also died. So then my grandpa started drinking. And by the time my mom and uncle were grown up, it was bad enough that the court gave my uncle full control of my grandpa's finances. So, even though we're technically rich, we only get as much as my uncle gives us, and my uncle kinda hates us, so we don't get a whole lot. So, even though we're technically rich, we only get as much as my uncle gives us, and my uncle kind of hates us, so we don't get a whole lot, and I don't want my grandpa to get a job because I just feel like it took him a really long time to find happiness, you know? Kip took a deep breath. Her expression was a bit bewildered, as if she hadn't expected to say so much. But Bunny could also see her shoulders fall back, as if she too had finally let go of something heavy. Does your grandpa know you ditched school to work? Bunny's mind was swimming with this new information. Grandpa doesn't even know I have a job. There's no way he'd let me keep working if he did know, Kip sighed. You think he'd really be mad at you? Questioned Bunny. You're just trying to help. He wouldn't be mad at me, he'd be mad at himself. Grandpa's been sober for almost a decade now, but he's never really forgiven himself. I honestly think it would kill him to find out, Kip said quietly. But it's not fair. I can't just do nothing. He already worked through his whole childhood. That's his money. He could go to court for it, but he won't because he feels guilty enough to just let my uncle have it. Why doesn't your uncle at least give you money? You didn't do anything to him. Bunny fumed, beginning to adopt Kip's frustration. My mom eloped, and he was not a fan of that decision, or her husband, said Kip, notably tightening her grip on the steering wheel. Bunny's own chest tightened as well. It was suddenly no mystery at all why Kip took so many measures to pass as human. It was even less of a mystery as to why her grandfather let her do whatever she wanted. All day, Bunny had imagined some naive, overly passive old man. In reality, even if he didn't know what Kip was up to, he probably had enough infinite elderly wisdom to know that at least this time he raised a good person. Kip deserved the trust she was given. Bunny quietly hoped that she deserved the trust Kip gave her. She didn't usually have to comfort anyone. Typically, Faith or Sammy would step in for that. So Bunny tried to say what she thought Faith might say to her. I'm sorry your uncle's a cunt. Maybe one day he'll trip and break his neck. Or catch fire when no one's around to help. After a beat of silence, where Bunny worried she'd said the wrong thing, Kip burst out laughing so hard she had to temporarily pull over. The rest of the drive was filled with a new level of camaraderie. They blasted music and sang together all the way to Bunny's house. When they arrived, Kip parked across the street and turned to Bunny. How much trouble are you going to be in? My sister's probably going to break both my legs while my brother cries in a corner, she answered. Well, that's a pretty picture, Kip said grimly. I don't care. Totally worth it, Bunny grinned. But I am sorry you missed your shift. Kip grinned back at her. No, totally worth it. Bunny's chest glowed again with that now familiar warmth. Want to have a sleepover next Thursday? She asked, before she could chicken out. Kip gasped. Is a certain someone starting to actually believe in the power of friendship? Bunny laughed. Shut up. Kip raised her pinky towards her. No takesies backsies. Bunny wrapped her pinky with Kip's, and their deal was sealed. She headed inside while Kip drove away. She couldn't wait to be alone in her too big room so that she could ruminate on everything that had happened. Even before her siblings had a chance to start yelling, Bunny broke the news to Sammy that they couldn't hang out on Thursdays anymore. The end.